Okay, are we ready? Great. Well, a very warm welcome, everyone, to the introduction to UKRI's Research Data Infrastructure Programme webinar. My name is Caroline Cake. I'm the Chief Executive at HDI UK, and I'm delighted to be chairing this event with a very distinguished panel, and also with my co-chair for today, Emma Gordon, who's Director of ADI UK. But before I introduce you to our panel, I just wanted to provide a couple of reflections on how listening is going to be an absolute key characteristic of this initial design and dialogue phase for the programme. So we know we need to listen to understand what research questions and research requirements need to be supported by this infrastructure. We also need to be listening to be understanding what public expectations are and requirements are for it as well. And also to be able to identify opportunities to design a collaborative approach that really draws on the existing skills and capabilities that exist across the UK. So if I take each of those in turn, the first one is actually, we know that the importance of data and analytics for research has been obviously really clearly demonstrated through COVID, but there are many, many unanswered questions that affect all of our lives now in the future. So for example, on health, climate change, inequalities. So we really need to be listening and understanding what the data and infrastructures need to be able to answer these questions and to meet the researchers who are working on those questions' needs. Second point then is really about understanding and involving the public. So members of the public are involved in this programme from the very start to inform what is in the public benefit and what expectations are around trustworthy research infrastructure and also transparent approaches to decisions about data access. And so really warm welcome to all of you from members of the public who've joined the call today. We're also recruiting new roles for members of the public to be part of the governance structures and decision-making processes. And we're going to be launching that in the next few days, so please do look out for that. So listening to and involving the public is going to result in much better research and better infrastructure. So it's going to be absolutely key throughout this programme. And then the final aspect is around collaborating effectively. So across the UK research, we've got extraordinary data assets and skills and capabilities. We've got technologies and approaches that include trusted research environments and many other aspects. So by listening and working together, we can build an understanding of what the future research requirements are likely to be, what technologies currently exist and are being used in trustworthy ways already, and what new approaches are likely to be developed. So really this emphasizing this aspect of listening. By listening, we're going to be able to understand the research questions and research requirements. We're going to be able to engage members of the public effectively, and we're going to be able to collaborate across the whole of the research community to design data research infrastructures that enable discoveries that benefit all of us. This is the first of many events and webinars to start this important first phase of the programme. And ensure we're kind of doing what we said and listening well today. We've got time at the end for questions. So we're going to make sure we've got 20 minutes at the end to listen for questions. And then actually we've got some time aside afterwards for those who want to carry on a bit further. But may I now very warmly welcome our fantastic panel for today. So we've got Professor Patrick Chinnery from the Medical Research Council, Jane Nicholson from the Engineering Physical Sciences Research Council, and Professor Sir Ian Diamond, the National Statistician. So hugely warm welcome to all of you today. I'm going to ask each of you in turn to perhaps give us a bit of kind of overview of the vision for digital research infrastructure. And just really want to start with you, Patrick. So Patrick, please can you perhaps share us your vision for this programme?
Caroline, thank you very much for the invitation and convening today's webinar. I'm Patrick Chinnery. For those of you that don't know me, I am the Clinical Director of the Medical Research Council within UK Research and Innovation. Reflecting back over the last 5 years, I think it's extraordinary to see the expansion of health data that has entered the research domain. And particularly in the last 12 months, this has moved at a pace that I don't think any of us could have imagined. We've seen multimodal data sets coming from a whole variety of different sources that are being leveraged on a scale never seen before. And within UKRI and the MRC, we recognise the potential this has for the future to work with you to unleash this capacity. What we want to do is we want to establish the UK as the global exemplar for trusted and connected data to enhance our position in the world so that we can address questions that really matter and have an impact on people's lives. Not just shaping government policy, not just shaping health policy, but actually impact on people's lives. And I think this endeavour in particular also presents an opportunity for us to change the science culture. We've been talking about open science for a long time, team science for a long time, but this medium really provides a platform for us to deliver on some of those ambitions. So the data and analytics research environment, or DARE phase 1, is a big first step on that journey. And it presents us all with a challenge that applies across all UKRI, research councils and Innovate UK, and actually beyond to other funders, NIHR in particular, and Wellcome funded research, to share best practice that we are learning through existing investments from research that's already funded. Because I strongly believe that solutions that are being generated to local problems have potential to be scaled up nationally and across multiple data sets to allow us to achieve this ambition. So I would just encourage all the participants on this call to engage. This is an opportunity for you to shape your future in this space. And I'll stop at that point, Caroline, and pass on. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, Patrick. Really nice kind of reflections on the kind of global exemplar, and also I think that kind of aspect of the culture change opportunities through this are really important. Ian, I'd like to invite you to perhaps tell us a little bit about how you think this approach will build on the collaboration we've already experienced through the pandemic.
Yeah, Caroline, thank you. And it's been an enormous privilege for ONS to work closely with UKRI through HDR UK and ADR to be able to bring data together to address really quite important problems with regard to the pandemic, where we know that it is important to have not just health data, but to be able to link in socioeconomic data and indeed to link in biological data, so that we've been able to understand very, very quickly some of the issues around different variants, but also to understand very quickly the efficacy of different vaccines. Doing all that, as Patrick said, requires a multimodal set of data, and to be able to do so very easily and freely, linking those data together. We have the technology to do that now, not by bringing enormous data lakes together, anything but by just having data held in a small number of extremely secure, trusted research environments which can talk to each other. And then we need to be able to bring multivariate data together from many different areas. Caroline, you talked about climate change, you talked about inequalities, as well as health. And we need to be able to bring data from different sources together. But to do so, critically, needing two things. One, the confidence of the public in that we do that. And at ONS, we've developed our 5 safes that we have been using, Caroline, with you to enable the data analysis to go forward for safe people, safe projects, safe settings, safe outputs, and safe data. And to do so in a way that is ethically sound and which is clearly doing work that is in the public interest. Now, that requires a real conversation, as you said, with our major stakeholders, our public. But it also requires that we've got one simple system of governance right across the whole of the UKRI ONS partnership, and that we are able at the same time to enable researchers and analysts to be able to do great things with those data in a way which is open and transparent, so that everybody very easily across the country can see the work that is going on. And finally, we need to have a very good training program associated with this, so that we are bringing on both a new generation of junior people who are able to be the future of doing this work. But at the same time, we have a system which is accessible to members of the public, to people across society who can also, with the right ethics, with the right controls, access really important data in an open and transparent way. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, Ian. I think that's a really nice final point in terms of around building the future capabilities to be able to do this for for this kind of myriad of different potential uses that could come out, that have we got that kind of depth of skills in the UK to be able to do that is a really important point. Thank you. And Jane, so love to hear your kind of thoughts on how you see researchers will be involved through this programme.
So thank you, Caroline, and thank you for inviting me along today. So maybe if I just put the kind of wider picture. So within UK Research Innovation, which brings together the real opportunity of multidisciplinary research activities, we're building a collective digital research infrastructure strategy, which will include kind of provision for these very data intensive sciences that we're talking about here, but also for high performance computing activities, how we have common authentication and access models, and how we also respond to kind of new technologies coming along that provide opportunities like artificial intelligence. So a key part of doing all those, and DARE is one of the first kind of preliminary projects in some of that activity building this overall plan, is making sure that we get input from researchers who want to be able to use these data sets on what are the questions they want to apply, building on all the things that Ian has said is important to make sure we've got kind of confidence of society in the data. But actually, what is it we want to do? There may be known communities who are already active in some of this area and they can put forward suggestions, but also maybe those research groups who haven't worked in this area, but think if they can access these data sets, which are from kind of multiple sources where they can combine things, what new ideas, how do we future-proof these capabilities such they can help us solve the problems we've got today and the things we've learned from the pandemic, but also actually address what might be the problems we don't yet know about, but may come in the future. So I think data is a key part of, and how we manage it and use it is a key part of supporting future research endeavour in the UK, which then goes on and has great impacts across society and the economy. And so making sure that researchers can identify and have a chance to input what they think are the questions they'd like to be able to answer, both for today, but also looking a little bit further into the future, I think is really key. And hopefully this scoping phase of the DARE programme will provide exactly that opportunity for people to be able to put forward their best ideas of what they'd like to see happen. And then we can see how that technically, by using the skills across life sciences, but also the kind of software engineers and computer scientists who can help make some of these things happen, how that collaborative working can really make this into a great success for the UK.
Thank you, Jane. I think you're right. That kind of aspect of really let's understand the potential questions and then build the aspects around that to be able to answer them is incredibly exciting as to where we could get to on that. Thank you all. Now our panelists, you'll be staying on, so we've got a couple of presentations and then we'll be opening up to questions, which I'm sure you prompted lots of questions for different people in there. I see them all starting to come through. So I'm now going to hand over to Emma, who's going to give us a kind of an overview of the programme. Emma, Emma, as I mentioned earlier on, is Director of ADR UK.
Thanks very much, Caroline, and great to be able to speak to you today about this. So yeah, I'm Director of ADR UK, which is an ESRC investment. I'll just say a few words about that programme to put into context why the Digital Research Infrastructure Programme is so important to us, and in particular why the design and dialogue phase of this new UKRI programme is key to how we take this forward. So the ADR UK programme is a partnership of government and academic groups across all 4 UK nations, led by my team within ESRC, and we're working to create linked research data sets from administrative sources and making these available to researchers through our network of trusted research environments. So we have ONS as our major data infrastructure partner within ADR England, with ADR UK directly funding the development and expansion of their secure research service. We also fund trusted research environments in Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland, run by Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency, Swansea University, that being the SAIL data bank, and Research Data Scotland, which includes the Edinburgh Parallel Computing Centre, the EPCC. So back when ADR UK started in 2018, we saw our remit as being squarely in the field of opening up access to linked administrative data. And our work is underpinned by the Digital Economy Act as a legislative framework to open up access to data. So as health data is specifically excluded from this Act, I would not have predicted how much of our work has ended up being about opening up access to data to directly support the management of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is supporting both UK government decision-making, but also decision-making across the devolved administrations. And I want to stress at this point that this was only possible because right across our 4 UK nations, we've been working collaboratively across sectors and across funding bodies throughout the pandemic to ensure that we can open up access to data for research safely and securely. To give you a few specific examples, we've been working in collaboration with MRC in investments such as HDR UK and the National Core Studies programme to improve access not just to administrative data but also health. And this is because we've been able to demonstrate that the design of a good, secure, robust, trusted research environment for administrative data works equally well for health data. So before the pandemic, there was some great work being done in both Scotland and Wales to link health and administrative data, which really demonstrated the research benefits of being able to look at the social determinants of health in addition to the disease outcomes. And I'm very excited to say that because of our collaborations with MRC and HDR UK, we're now opening up access to this type of data for England through the ONS Secure Research Service now. So this collaborative working is how we've opened up access to everything from test and trace data to wastewater treatment data to track early sight of new COVID variants, and more recently health data linked to census and mortality data so that we can properly assess the risk to different groups in society of COVID-19, for example, by ethnicity and occupational group. And as we move out of the critical phase into the recovery phase of the pandemic, this type of cross-sectoral data linkage will become increasingly important as the need for further insights based not just on health data, but education, benefits, income, homelessness, and crime and justice data grows. Now, on a more practical note, we also need to ensure that the trusted research environments we're investing in are working for the people that are carrying out the research. So we need to ensure that they have access to the right metadata before they submit a proposal, so they are clear that the research questions can be answered from the data. And we need to be streamlining approvals processes, as others have said, so decisions on projects can be turned around within reasonable timeframes. We also need to be ensuring that researchers can be learning from each other, for example, by sharing code and concepts. And this is currently done really well in some trusted research environments, but not in others. So we need to be driving up consistency of standards and approaches right across our trusted research environments, whether these are funded by NERC, EPSRC, ESRC, MRC, whoever. Fundamentally, though, all of this demonstrates the need to have a national conversation about the design of trusted research environments that UKRI and others invest in. And I can absolutely see a case, as Ian has said, for more interoperability between these environments. So, for example, allowing analysis of atmospheric pollution data to be analysed alongside public health data. However, this absolutely needs to be done in ways that not only maintains the security of the data, but also allows us to build meaningful trust with the public by properly involving them in this conversation. So now more than ever, we know we need to be able to work across sectors to link data to deliver policy relevant insights that can then feed into better decision making by governments. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Lots of, again, fantastic examples of the potential opportunities here and what it'll take to do it. So really, thank you for setting it out so clearly on there. I think that leads us quite nicely into, as you said, your point of that close engagement with the public and patients and kind of all of us involved in that. If I can very warmly welcome Angela Coulter, who is the chair of Health Data Research UK's Public Advisory Group. So Angela, just wanted to invite you to perhaps give us some of your reflections on the kind of public benefit involvement in this programme.
Thanks, Caroline. We've already heard quite a bit about trusted research environments, but it's important to remember that trust has to be earned. It's not about assuming that blind faith is enough. Trustworthiness, as Honora O'Neill has frequently reminded us, has to be demonstrated. Personal information is personal to the individual. So de-identification and pseudonymization doesn't absolve researchers from using it responsibly. I hope this initiative will focus on establishing trustworthy research environments. People are very interested in how their personal data is used. This was very apparent in the recent response to NHS Digital's plans for general practice data for planning and research. And many people will have seen lurid headlines talking about data grab or selling our data, or claims that it was rushed out without consultation. But the only alternative suggested by the privacy campaigners was to opt out of data sharing altogether, which of course would make the data sets much less useful if large numbers followed that advice. There has to be a better way to deliver the promised public benefit while maintaining public trust. People want to know who's accessing our data, for what purpose? Will our privacy be respected? How will our personal information be kept secure? What safeguards are in place to prevent the data being passed on to others? What sanctions will be applied if breaches occur? Will our personal data be sold to commercial entities? And if so, who benefits? And who's accountable for its safe, appropriate use? The answers to these questions must be clear, honest, and comprehensible if they're to engender trust. Terms like data linkage, algorithms, artificial intelligence, machine learning, these are scary ideas for the non-cognoscenti, and they cry out for lucid explanations that people can understand. And standards for safe use of data should be applicable across the board. I know that HDR UK, and I'm sure ADR UK as well, have a strong commitment to clear communications and public involvement. But the public may not distinguish between different data custodians or sponsors. One bad apple can infect the whole crop. So I believe there's an urgent need for universally applied standards, emphasizing transparency, accountability, and public involvement. I'd like to see data custodians enabling public involvement across the entire data lifecycle: collection, storage, access, and use. They should agree and adopt a standard set of rules on data governance and the criteria used to assess data access requests. And these should be published on their websites so that all can see them. And they should also make available data use registers, regularly updated, so that the public can see how their data have been used and by whom, the conditions of use, how these have been monitored, and what sanctions are applied when necessary. For their part, researchers must accept that working through TREs or safe havens, rather than holding the data themselves, is a better basis for securing public trust. They must also be willing to provide a clear statement of the purpose and likely public benefit to be gained from each use of the data, including honest accounts of potential applications, uncertainties, and risks, and how these will be managed. Wherever possible, there should be public involvement in all stages of the research, and the results should be disseminated in a form that's accessible to the public. So my plea is for public involvement in the design and development of the national digital research infrastructure is essential. They must be involved from the outset and throughout the entire process. Thank you.
Angela, thank you for putting that across so clearly, the importance and unpicking the different elements of what trust actually means. And it's really important for us to be kind of thinking through, and I think that'll be embedded into everything that's going forward in this programme from here. At this stage, I'm really pleased to be introducing Hans-Erik Aronson and Jerry Riley. So Hans-Erik Aronson is going to be the program director, or is the program director for this program. Joined us earlier this week, so very fresh into all of it, and has just joined us from the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory in the US. So delighted to have you with us, Hans-Erik. And Jerry Riley, who's HDR UK's technologist in residence. And so Jerry and Hans-Erik are going to take us through a little bit of more kind of overview of actually how the program is actually going to work. So over to you both.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I will start off. So this is the introductory phase one of this larger initiative, and it's the collaborative design and dialogue phase. And if I can have the next slide, please. So what exactly are we trying to, what question are we trying to answer here? The question is, how should a national secure and interoperable digital research infrastructure and associated services be designed and implemented? This is a multi-year project. During the first phase, however, we are going to look at what has been done already and what the community needs. The purpose of this is to connect and analyze complex, sensitive, often unconsented data sets from across disciplines and sectors in a flexible, efficient, and sustainable way so we don't go broke. Please, next slide, please. I should say here that I'm going to have a few busy slides, not many, but they will be available afterwards, so you don't have to take notes. A key part of this is to demonstrate trustworthiness with the public. What we're doing here has to fit the bill for both data controllers, scientists, but very notably the public, and their trust is essential. This is going to be a community co-designed effort that would be inclusive and transparent. We'll engage with a range of stakeholders from across many different disciplines and sectors to ensure that we are mindful of all their needs and concerns. We'll have formal engagement with the UKRI leadership, including the Digital Research Infrastructure Committee, with industry and international thought leadership that are working in this space. Stakeholders from relevant UKRI investments, there would be both HDR UK and ADR UK, of course, but ATI, IRIS, Archer, and Jasmine, for instance. So this includes high-performance computing environments as well as health data research providers. They have considerable track records and expertise and links with their respective communities, which will be essential for us to develop this blueprint that we are hoping to derive during this first phase. And that blueprint will be built on best practices. Data standards, access, and ethics are going to be paramount for this. We are going to gather detailed technical and social specifications that meet both the trustworthiness for the public and the technical requirements to make this work. And we are mindful of privacy, right? So we're going to evaluate and promote the use of privacy-enhancing technologies in this effort. Part of this that will be addressed later by Jerry is a series of sprint exemplar projects that will be essentially proof of concepts or listening exercises. We'll understand how people are deriving, looking at, for instance, consenting and privacy concerns, not only technology. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we're starting from a number of assumptions. We're not starting from scratch. Each research council has a lot of expertise in this area. There are established infrastructures. Lots of data research and use cases are already had already been done, and we're going to draw on this to make this a success. There is a cross-council need. There are strategic use cases that span research councils and require common architecture. These are high priority fundable research efforts, and we are going to look to those for the skills and know-how to make this a success. Notably here, an assumption is that federated infrastructure is technically feasible. This is not necessarily going to be easy, but it's something that has to be done. And we will, as Srian mentioned, we will integrate these data environments in a sustainable fashion so that we can address data from multiple sources in a technically feasible manner. It is also going to be ethically and legally feasible to do this effort. And we need to be mindful of the trust of the public. Very importantly, a lot of the infrastructure is very, very expensive. And the assumption here is that it is feasible to do this in the funding and time envelope set by the UKRI mandate. By leveraging existing established technologies, architectures, and standards, we can make this a phased approach that will stay within the timeline. Also, there's strong buy-in for this across the research councils, the government, the data custodians, and the researchers for this federated approach. Next slide, please. So there are a number of key stakeholders that we need to address, and these are not in a particular order here, but data users across research communities, academia, charities, industry, government, and the NHS. Current beneficiaries of research, patient groups are notable here, funding partners, data privacy and advocacy groups, the general public representatives that were mentioned earlier that would be brought in, technology providers and enablers, of course, current data custodians, and current TRE service providers. Policymakers are critical for this, both associated with research, public health, and innovation. And again, international thought leaders in digital research infrastructure. Next slide, please. So the outputs that we are expecting from this exercise is a design for a novel, sustainable federated digital infrastructure. Services, theories, privacy-enhancing technologies are going to be cornerstones of this. It has been co-developed with the users, funders, the public, technology providers, and data custodians. There will be a series of sprints, use cases that we are going to launch, and they will be essential for providing the proof of concepts to carry this forward. We are going to have a number of stakeholder engagement activities to gather the information that we want from the user community, from the community out there, both public and academic. And at the end of this, we need to have a detailed delivery plan for phase 2 and an outline for phase 3, as this is a multi-phase effort over many years. So the contributions to UKRI Digital Research Infrastructure Committee business case for phase 2 and beyond is also one of the outcomes that is essential from this exercise. Next slide, please. So phase 1 has 4 steps effectively. This is the kickoff step in July of 2021. We then go into the listen and learn portion of this that will last until December. We listen to stakeholders. We have a number of stakeholder interviews, outreach activities to find out what the field really needs. Between December of this year and March of next year, we have our test and evolve effort. And lastly, between April and July, we will try to agree and come up with a final plan for phase 2 and phase 3. So again, this is going to take some time, but we are actually working on a fairly aggressive schedule here to make this a reality. And Jerry, maybe you can take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Hans-Erik. Next slide, please. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jerry Riley. I'm technologist in residence with Health Data Research UK. So in this final section, before we move into the Q&A, I just wanted to take us through a few details of the Sprint Exemplar program that Hans-Erik has just mentioned. And we're intending to run this in parallel to the consultation and listening throughout the design and dialogue phase. Alongside the other elements of the design and dialogue phase, these sprints are intended to test the ideas that will come out from the stakeholder engagement, so we can learn how we might increase researcher impact by aligning around a common federated data infrastructure across the councils with a shared set of standards for governance, ethics and public engagement. We aren't going into this with a defined view of what the requirements are, nor a best perspective on how to deliver against those requirements. This first phase, as Caroline, Emma, Hans-Eric and others have mentioned, is about consultation, and the sprint projects are about looking at some experimentation around how we might approach this. Next slide, please. And this isn't about technology. I've already seen one question come through. So this is most definitely not just about technology. The sprint projects we'll be looking at, we think, are going to try and address, in some cases, more than one area, but across 3 different areas. We are really interested in driver use cases that require access to linked data from across different domains and different research councils. We see this as a real opportunity for some of the world-leading research moving on into the later 2020s and beyond. We are interested in technology demonstrators, but we're interested in building also from things that have already been proven. So we're particularly interested in perhaps projects that take technologies that have successfully been deployed in one research domain and see how those might be deployed elsewhere. And really importantly, we are interested in establishing best practice for governance, for ethics, for public engagement. So, as has been mentioned by several speakers so far, public trust is essential so that projects can share and develop new approaches. So proposals that can share new approaches, new ways of actively engaging the publics will be really important. Next slide, please. So we want this to be a program of sprint projects. We're not looking for projects that just run in isolation. We're wanting projects that can inform each other and work as a community. We will be looking to fund up to 10 projects that collaborate together to build a better understanding of what is needed to establish the requirements for the next phase. But each successful project, we'll be looking to run for up to 8 months. So 8 months takes us through to July of 2022. These are sprints. We want them to be very fundamental in establishing the requirements for the subsequent phases of this program. And we will fund for between 100 and 400K. And these can be a collaboration from across academia, with charities, with other elements of the wider public sector, and with industry. And as usual with projects that we've run, selection will be by an independent panel, including, of course, public representation. Next slide, please. So this is a tentative timeline, and I wanted to share it today because we're going to move quite fast through this. So please view these dates as still provisional. July 2022 is not very far away. So we want to be able to move quickly to selection to maximize the amount of time available for the sprints to deliver great outcomes. So we anticipate running a call launch in mid-September. The date of the 16th of September is tentative. We are aware that there is a clash on this date with the Jewish Day of Atonement, so we may need to move this date slightly, but it will be mid-September. We'll be looking to close applications approximately a month later so that we can be through the review, selection and contracting phase through towards the end of November. Our aim is therefore to be in a position that sprints can be up and going right at the beginning of December to give us a maximum amount of time to deliver these outcomes as a community. This will be fast, but from our experience from other programs, these short, sharp projects can really deliver outstanding insight and lay a strong foundation for future collaboration. We will share full details of the sprint program at the sprint call launch webinar. We'll also be sharing it out through our website, through distribution lists, because we really want to see a large and diverse mix of applications. So please do get started on your plans. So I look forward to seeing a wide range of applications and working with you to deliver the community of sprint programs. Next slide, please. So this is a listening phase. We don't know the answers. We don't know what will be technically delivered, but what we want to do is we want to hear from as wide a range of our community as possible, from across the different research domains, from those who are researchers, those who are data custodians, from those who have interests in policy, and very importantly, from those for whom this data is about, from the public. So we want to have engagement across the community. And so please do sign up, visit the website. This is a holding website while we work out branding, put up a formal website. Please do visit the holding page on the UKRI website and sign up on the online form. And that'll help us keep you informed about what's going on, the activities that are just starting up, and really get your voice heard. So with that, I would like to hand back to Caroline, and Caroline will be taking us through the Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all of you for thank you, Jerry and Hans Erik, for that very helpful overview, and to all of our speakers and panelists so far. We have a very long list of questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them. I've kind of marked a few we're going to go through. Apologies if we don't cover everyone's, but we're going to do our best to get through them. So what I'll do is I'll choose a person to answer each one. And if someone else would like to add in further comments after that, but I'll look to ideally kind of march through so that we cover as many questions as we can on that. So the first question I'm going to ask to Ian. So this is one from Lisa Murphy, which is about, should we be talking about holding data in TREs? And she's got a kind of narrative around question around the narrative we needed being around access and analysis layer that overlies the data repositories, allowing to stay as local as possible. So just want to hear your kind of thoughts on that, Ian.
Yeah, no, I apologise if what Lisa would probably say was my sloppy language, and I think her narrative is much better, and I will, with her agreement and properly referenced, always try to say that in future.
Wonderful, very, very succinct there. Anyone else want to add in anything from there? Okay, in which case we're going to go to one from Bakudi here, which is I'm going to ask to Patrick. So he's asking here about any strategy for targeted data collection analysis for research around NHS pressure points.
Yes, so I'm not aware of any such initiative within UKRI for sure. Whether NHS Digital are doing that or not, I couldn't actually answer that question, Caroline, to be honest with you. So we're not addressing it within our own organisation.
And I'm guessing through this work, there'll obviously be one of the areas we're wanting to kind of understand what the needs are and requirements and things are around that, because that'd be quite interesting to kind of feed into there. Lovely. Anonymous one here, which I'm going to ask to Jane, saying here in delivering trusted and connected data and gosh, it's a snappy title, isn't it? Data and analytics research environments. What's your initial view on where the greatest challenges will lie across people, processes, technology, or data?
So I think that's an interesting question. I think most probably it is getting, it's the people aspects in terms of getting everyone comfortable that when we say it's a trusted research environment, it is a trusted research environment. Most probably is the challenge. There will be challenges in all the other areas. So I think actually across the whole suite, but most probably everyone feeling comfortable, both as citizens, that our data is being used and then how it's being used, most probably is because it's such a big engagement. Everyone will have a view and opinion on that. The other things I think are some challenges. It's not totally straightforward to find out ways to how you access data and how you integrate data and how you can then use it. So there's new research challenges in solving how you do some of that. But I'd put most probably the people aspect is maybe the one that at this stage in the project is going to be key.
Fantastic, wonderful, thank you. Next one is going to be to you, Ian. So what is the statistical expertise? So what is the statistical expertise infrastructure strategy?
I'm sorry, I got statistical expertise, but I didn't get anything else.
So what is the statistical expertise infrastructure strategy?
Well, that was the point I was trying to make. I mean, I think we really do need to do a lot of things. So we need to ensure that we've got a new generation of people who are skilled in being able to use multi modal data in an interoperable way. And in many ways, that's not far from where a lot of people were some time ago, with a much more simple strategy when we were using cohort data and linking different data together. So we've moved forward, and what you need to do is, I think, working with UKRI, put together some really good doctoral training programs which bring on a new set of researchers. But at the same time, I think it's incredibly important that we recognize that we need greater data literacy across our entire population. One of the things that the pandemic has shown is that the public have a real appetite for data and for understanding data. Now we need to take that forward to enable people to be able to ask questions of data in an important way. If we're serious about being inclusive, not only in the way we collect data, but also in the way we enable people to access research questions, then we need to improve that data literacy. So I think the strategy has to be very much about improving public data literacy, as well as bringing on a new generation of people who are able to do that, if you like, the complex multivariate analyses across different sectors of data very well.
Great, thanks, Ian. And that's actually a question from Sue Mallett at UCL, and there's a couple of other questions that great questions Sue's raised. Sue, just in the interest of making sure I kind of cover everyone, we'll perhaps pick those other ones up separately on there. Next question then from Anonymous is, Emma, I was going to ask you this one, is will access to these data, both health and admin, be limited to researchers only?
So I think not limited to academic researchers. So we fund the ONS Secure Research Service, as I mentioned, and they don't make any distinction between who the researcher is. It might be a government researcher, it might be an academic researcher, or somebody working for a consultancy or a charity. But the fundamental test is can the research questions be answered from the data? And are they methodologically sound? Is it going to deliver good science? But fundamentally, is it being done in the public good? And if it passes all of those tests, then the project can proceed. That we don't make any distinction about what type of researcher they are.
Thanks, Emma. Next one, actually, I am Sue, having said I was going to, Sue's got lots of great questions here. There's another one from Sue Mallett here at UCL, which I'm actually going to ask to Angela and to Ian. So really asking around what will the mechanism be to safeguard data, and then what's the punishment if someone sells data onto others, or if they data dredge?
Shall I kick off and then Angela can come in? I don't mind. Or Angela, I'm not trying to jump in if you'd like to go first.
Oh, please.
Please, Ian, that'd be great.
I think it's important just to say, Caroline, that no one actually accesses any data in the way that we're talking. So no one actually sees any data. No one, if you like, plays with individual data. What you do is you put a project which says, I'm going to do some analyses. We enable the analyses that you want to do to be done behind a very secure firewall, and you see the results of that analysis. Now, before you see the results of that analysis, it is checked to ensure that it satisfies privacy disclosure standards, so that we are very clear that no individual, for example, could ever be identified. And the kind of way we do that has been widely published, widely talked about. It's following, as I said in my introduction, the 5 safes. And it does mean that people are able to access the data to do analysis, but not, if you like, to look at the data. We're not the only method for doing this. The Open Safely approach, which I also think is very good, works in a very similar way, where really good analysis can be done, but where the privacy of the individual is maintained and is absolutely sacrosanct. We don't, for example, Angela mentioned de-anonymized and pseudo-anonymized. I don't think that's the way forward anymore. We've moved beyond those approaches to a much more secure and safe way of working. And that's certainly the way that we work. And we are, as having worked in partnership with ADR for some time, we'll be taking that forward in a way that we already know how to do. Angela.
Yes, I mean, as I understand it, different TREs work slightly differently, and no doubt there'll be lots of developments along the way in how these things are handled. But for me, the absolute key is public scrutiny throughout, because the public needs to know what's being done with their data. They need to understand the whole concept of a TRE, which is quite hard to explain. So communications is going to be absolutely key, but active involvement of public representatives in the process as it goes along, I think is the best way to ensure that people feel that content that their data are being kept secure.
Angela, I couldn't agree more. And certainly we have what is recognised to be very good public engagement at all times and at all levels to enable our data to be used. And I think it's worth saying that, you know, this is not kind of something for the future. We're already doing this. It's working extremely well. The public are involved in all our processes and in all the decision making. I did see a question, Caroline, which said these are the lists of people that should be included, and I thought that was a very sensible list, and I would hope that we did that now.
Great, thanks Ian and Angela. My next question then is going to be to Jerry. So this is one from Rachel Heron. So she was wondering how research teams can make their data sets discoverable for others in the TREs, as well as being able to access data sets already there.
So really good question. One of the things we've already been working over the last 12 to 18 months at Health Data Research UK has been around discoverability. So the work we've initiated around the Innovation Gateway was really centered around making data sets discoverable, not just from within a particular TRE, but across the whole breadth of TREs, and making, through having representation of those data sets through rich metadata, not with the data sets themselves within the gateway. So that's really been the focus of our Innovation Gateway project. And we are very keen to expand that to a broader set of data sets and to build out from that. So I'd be really keen to follow up, Rachel, because I'm assuming behind that question, there's data sets you're keen to potentially make available for discovery. So we can follow up with that and we can take you through what we're doing with the Innovation Gateway. But that really has been the focus of what we're doing, and that could well play out into what we're trying to do with this program as well.
Wonderful, thanks, Jerry. And maybe it'd be great if someone could post a link to the gateway in there so people can have a look at the types of things that are accessible in there. A really interesting question here from Lucy Burgess, which I was going to ask Patrick and Emma. So she's saying here, access by the public to data sets, which are typically sensitive and currently accessible only by research organizations, is a transformative change which needs the right safeguards in place. Citizen science projects like Galaxy Zoo and Physics have made great discoveries, but are typically led by academic scientists. Actually, Jane, you might also want to be adding some thoughts in here. I like the vision, but it keeps coming. It comes with a risk, such as knowledge of ethical research standards, keeping data secure, anonymized, and demonstration of public benefit. How will UKRI achieve this public access in practice? Who would like to take that one?
So I'll respond in part. I mean, it touches a bit on the comments that Ian was making earlier, doesn't it? Which he covered comprehensively. And in a way, the question is partly rhetorical with some of the answers in the question, I think. The answer to your question is, from my perspective, is that we haven't engaged this as thoroughly as we might. And, you know, we would be looking to HDR UK and possibly some of the DARE initiatives to help guide us in shaping our approach to this moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. I don't know if Emma and Jane, if you want to add any thoughts on that.
I'll add something. So a big part of the new investment phase of ADI UK that just kicked off at the start of this year is around training and capacity building. And so, although not sort of generic members of the public, we absolutely see that we've got a role to play in making sure that our undergraduate and master's level students know how to analyze these types of data sets. And so we have to be doing a lot more with data owners to potentially, and I'm just putting this forward as an example, create data sets that are entirely synthetic, but have the characteristics of the real data set. So have the same types of variable names and are constructed in the same way, so that we can actually teach students at that level about this type of data. Because if we're not doing that, then we're effectively not doing anything to train up the next generation of researchers to use these increasingly complex data sets. So I absolutely see that we've got a role to play there. In terms of kind of more generic citizen data science, really interested to know if people have got any ideas about how we could do that, because it's a very, very interesting idea. I know that there's been some great examples of where that's been done across other fields, and I started work as a zoologist, and I know there's some great examples that have been done around bird surveys and animal surveys, for example. But yeah, open to any good ideas.
Thanks, Emma. That's great. The question here from Corey, which I'm going to ask to perhaps Jane and Jerry. It'd be good to hear your thoughts on here. So mentioning here that the kind of pandemic has demonstrated that investing in strong analytical capacity and a shared TRE has allowed rapid response within communities and at scales that can drive direct actions. It also builds deep understanding of context and local systems, data and services. So the question is, do you envisage a scalable role for such deeply embedded TRE models working as part of a network? And that's to Jane and Jerry. Which of you would like to take that one?
So maybe I'll start. I'm not an expert in this field, but I can certainly see that you would wish to do this, and what we really need to understand is, by doing this, what are the questions we can answer. So if answering the kind of questions we want to address require going at this level, these are the types of things that should be considered as part of the scoping phase, I would imagine, for this programme. But it's kind of knowing that by doing this, we'll get access to data that will give us greater richness in the kind of research understanding as we go forward. Would then mean that most probably focusing on this, which could make things more complex, has added value.
Great, thanks, Jane. I'm just noticing we're now at 3 o'clock. So at this point, there's a very much, so that the session was running from 2 to 3. We have an option, a few of us can stay on for an extra 15 minutes, because there's a wonderful 63, it's just dropped down, 63 questions in the list. So we're kind of cracking through different ones in here, but we'll just going through in order. So those who'd like to go, please do. Those who'd like to stay on for another 15 minutes, and we can see if we can cover many as we can as we go through on that. So next question then is from Ngozi, which is, and the question there is around how do we deal, and I'm trying to think who would be best placed to answer this one. I'm going to ask Jerry if you might be interested in asking that one, and potentially Angela having some thoughts if you're still on at the moment, which is, how do we deal with the fact there'll be commercial involvement in research using routinely collected data, for example, for secondary research, regulatory requirements, etc.?
So I think the first thing is we've got to be comfortable with encouraging industry involvement and commercial involvement. I think one of the strengths of the sort of approach that we've been looking at around trusted research environments, and Sir Ian talked about earlier, is these environments are secure. So whether the researchers are coming in from industry or whether they're coming in from academia, we should be applying the same very high bar of ethics, of governance, of public benefit. But the analysis is occurring in environments where there is not disclosure of the data out to those environments. So those commercial entities cannot be selling on data, using it for purposes that were not approved. So we've got to set that bar very high and keep to that bar being very high. But in doing that, we should be encouraging that industry participation, that commercial participation, but on the basis that the work being done is research for the public benefit. and not research that wouldn't be supported. So I think that can be approached in a strong and ethical way, and we should indeed be encouraging it. And we should be encouraging the collaboration between industry and academia and the public sector to do so.
Thanks, Jerry. Angela, is there anything you want to add on to that?
Yes, I mean, Jerry's absolutely right. Those standards must apply. But we know from all the research that's been done that the public is more suspicious about uses of data by commercial organizations. And this may be because, people tend to think sort of in a knee-jerk reaction about, oh, we don't want, people who are going to make money out of our personal data, etc. But it may also be because often the public benefit criterion hasn't been applied very rigidly, or it hasn't been seen to be applied. So it seems to me that the onus is going to be on those organizations who want to use the data to really communicate clearly about what they're going to do with it and why this is going to benefit the public. But also to be completely honest about any kind of profit motive as well, because that is something that people are suspicious of.
Thank you, Angela. A question here from Lisa, Lisa Calderwood, which I'll answer directly, which is HDR UK has just conducted a scoping study for ESRC, MRC and Wellcome on Population Research UK, or PR UK, and published a green paper for this consultation. Green paper seems to cover a lot of these areas. How is this initiative linked up with PR UK? So very short, can talk about this more extensively, Lisa, but the very short answer to it is that all of that will feed into this work. So the work that we're talking about today goes much broader and much kind of bigger scale across all aspects of research in the UK. So this will be, the PR UK piece will be a very important feed into, and we'll be drawing actively on that. Great. I'm just going through next one. Oh, Angela, keeping you in the hot seat. This is one from Lucy again, Lucy Burgess, wholeheartedly supporting your opening remarks on public engagement involvement. Her question is that, so open dialogue and community co-design mentions involvement of public, but how will this be achieved in practice?
Yeah, it's not always easy to do, and it's important to try to use different methods to find out what the public thinks. So individual representatives are hugely important, but also those representatives need to keep an eye on what, for example, voluntary organisations are thinking, or what research has been done about what the public think. And again, publishing, communicating is absolutely key, I think. We've learned a lot actually over the last year or so from organisations like Understanding Patient Data, who've done some, or pulled together some really excellent research, and others have too, about what people think and what people want. And we have to continue learning because that's going to change over time.
Great, thank you. Question here, which I'll ask to Ian, is from Alison McFarlane. So she's a long-standing user of the ONS Secure Data Service to build a birth cohort, and has no doubt about the value of secure environments. Kind of referring to, as Angela mentioned earlier on, the kind of over the last few months, the kind of the messages around opt-outs, etc. And she really wanted to kind of, her question is, what can be done about this? It looks like you're closing the stable door after the horse has bolted.
Well, I think it's always good to get a question from Alison, and it's always a question which is absolutely to the point. And certainly, I was asked to advise NHS, and I have helped with advice, and I think that there is great progress being made, and I hope and believe that Angela would be very pleased with the ways in which public engagement is absolutely at the heart of that, as is making sure that anything that happens is ethically sound and is in the public interest, and that the public have a view in saying what those two things are. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. One here from Guy Cohen, which I'll steer to either Hans-Erik or Jerry, which is, can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by federated infrastructure? Does this mean users could execute a query over distributed data sets? And if so, would that be done with federated learning or separate queries or something else?
Hans-Erik, do you want me to take that one?
You kick it off if you want, sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So It's a really good question, and one we've been looking at in HDR UK actually for quite a long time. So there are a set of research questions that need to be addressed across data that's held in multiple different TREs. And as Sir Ian said, we're not in a world where we're looking at combining everything into a single data lake. We are in a world where data is nicely held in secure environments, of which there may be a reasonably small or a slightly bigger number. So we want to be able to run distributed queries. Those may be running the same query in multiple places and then aggregating the statistical results, or they may be running more complex queries where we have different data in different environments. Now, and in some cases that would be distributed machine learning. Now, what those use cases look like, how we approach this is definitely part of this discussion phase. We're not going into this with a defined view of what the technology approaches should be, but what we are going into it is to understand what those research use cases might be. So again, I'd say out to everybody on the call and beyond is we want to hear what those use cases are, because you can construct some that are very complex to do technically, actually quite complex to do from a governance point of view as well, but might actually be very edge case, it might be very marginal. So we want to know about which ones are really key. And then as we go through this phase and future phases, we can look at the technology and the governance approaches for those. But definitely we know there are use cases where we have got to do federated analytics.
Thanks, Jerry. Hans, do you want to add anything on?
I think that's right. I mean, we're going to look at what's out there today in the different TREs and where we should take that tomorrow, right? So there will be definitely cases where we have federated data sets that are accessed from places where the data do not live and vice versa. So you can imagine APIs behind the scenes that will make this possible, but very importantly, this has to be done in a secure manner, especially when you deal with sensitive data sets.
Thanks, Hans-Erik. A question here from John L, which is around data controllers having different risk appetites and opinions on how personal data under its responsibility should be governed. Navigating it can be challenging. I'll answer this question very briefly in terms of there's a, however, common authoritative point of reference in the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO. Are there plans to actively involve the ICO in the development of this initiative? Yes. Emphatic yes, they will be part of our stakeholder group, and we'll be getting in touch if there's anyone on the ICO at the moment. Hello, and we will certainly be in touch soon on that, so thank you. The next question then, I'm now running out of I've marked everyone up until this point, so I'm going to be reading a little bit fresh from here. One from Alex Bailey. So compared to the England health data linkage, admin linkage, and health data linkage all appear to be easier and quicker in Scotland and Wales. Is this scale, politics, different legal structure, etc.? How do these differences impact on the UK-wide environment? And that's obviously quite a big question here. I'm just thinking whether, Jerry, just a kind of very high-level thoughts as to how we'll be factoring that in.
So, great question, Alex, and probably a valid observation. So there are some elements where there's more maturity in the approach in some of the UK nations, and also the scale question there as well. So we do want to look as we go through this phase about how the approaches we might take here work across the nations, how that linkage might occur. We're not at the point of implementation, so it's really important. This is a listening phase, but we do want to make sure that in the same way we learn best practices across the different research domains, we're also learning best practices and approaches and problem solving that come from across the 4 nations of the UK.
Thank you. There's one here from, hello Marco, from Our Future Health. So I'm rattling through as fast as I can the different ones on here. So the good question here about how we see things intersecting with things that are in flight. I'll just answer that one briefly. So for example, Our Future Health need to procure a TRE and accrediting others by the first quarter of next year. So yes, very keen to, as part of the stakeholder kind of aspects, working, having conversations with so we know the kind of different what's happening at different stages, and therefore how to inform and help guide some of that and provide input to it. But at no stage will this be looking to slow anything down. So hopefully that won't, it'll be just great to build off the thinking and work that you're doing in there. There's also a question from you, Marco, around is it, as it's HDR UK led, is it specific to health context? No, it's not, and it's jointly led by ADR UK and HDR UK, so very much across all of the research councils. Skimming through the questions and things. I think, just going right down, and I'm conscious we're very short on time. One here from Sam, sorry, and all the questions above, there are fabulous questions in there. It's just a matter of the last 3 minutes on there. Sam from Med Confidential, you've picked an aggressive sprint timescale that works for you. What if that timescale is too fast for those you're claiming to consult and listen to? How many days will be between HDR UK saying a project is successful and expecting it to commence? Hans, Sarah, do you want to take that one?
That's a little bit difficult. I would say that there is a need for some speed here, but that doesn't mean that, well, we probably have some level of flexibility. I would actually have to answer to Jerry, who's been part of this process a little longer.
So it's a great question, Sam, and this is an aggressive schedule, and the reason it's aggressive is because we've got to be able to use the sprints to help inform what goes into the second phase of the program. So essentially we back off there, and what we want to do is provide as much time as possible for real work to occur in the sprints. So we've come back to as aggressive a schedule as looks viable, and as you know, we've done this a couple of times. Sprints aren't for everybody, because some organizations won't be able to put together the resources and the proposals in time. It's a bit like, hey, not everybody who's out there running an 800 meters or 1500 meters in Tokyo is actually suited to running 100 meters or 200 meters. You've got to be able to turn around. The timeline I laid out is we have the applications in mid-October. We will be reviewing quite early in November, and then we'll be looking for projects to be starting up in early December. So that does drive certain assumptions. It does mean you already have to have all your data access approvals. You're not going to be collecting new data. You're not going to be going through new access requests. So if you're going to propose a project that requires data, you're going to need it. You're using existing staffing. You're not going to be hiring new staffing. But we've seen from previous projects that there are a bunch of organizations in the community who can turn around, and we can get that insight. So as I said, doesn't suit everybody, but we need to move at this pace to actually be able to get through those sprints in time to inform the second phase of the program.
Thank you. There are many more questions in there, and as Andrew's posted in the chat, we'll get back to everyone with in terms of the high level kind of thoughts and comments on that. But thank you, because the questions are not only the answers we give to you, but actually your questions will inform our thinking and things from here. So really important input for us. Thank you for a wonderful session. Thank you to our wonderful speakers and panelists, many of whom have already jumped off and things on there because it was due to finish at 3 o'clock, so understandably on there. And thank you for everyone who's listened and also stayed on for the extended time. I hope you all have a great rest of the day.